This video is the second of a two-part video series about plagiarism for my English 101 class. In the first video, I went over what plagiarism is, different types of plagiarism, and how to avoid it with a step-by-step approach. So if you have not watched that video yet, please stop this and go watch it before you continue. What this video is going to do is go over a more concrete example of what plagiarism looks like. I have an activity up on the screen. This will also be available as a document on Blackboard, and I encourage you to open that now. You can be listening to this video while I go over it. So what this is, if you're looking at the screen or if you have it open, on the first page or on the left side of the screen as I have it now is an online article. This is from 2008, so it's a fairly old article at this point, but it will work for our example. This was written by a guy named Bruce Watson. To give you a synopsis of it, I'll let you read it on your own. I'll read it to you on the video. But it's an article about a man from Tennessee who was fired as a mall Santa, and that the article is talking about how mall Santas are paid, and that this guy was paid very well for being a Santa because he very much looks the part, instead of what the author calls, the alcoholic in a tattered suit experience when he was a kid, where the guy's beard is fake and he's not very bubbly or jolly. And so it's Bruce Watson again, as if he read this story or heard about this Santa and has written this article in response, describing how he feels about it. On the right side is as it says here, a mock response or a mock page. And so it's two paragraphs, and we'll use it as like an example of, let's say, a student who had written a response to Bruce Watson's article. And in these two short paragraphs, here on again on the right side of the screen, or if you have the document open, it's the second page, where there are 5 different kinds of plagiarism. So I want to go over these so you can see just how plagiarism can look. It comes in a lot of different forms, some more obvious, or as I called in the last video, intent to deceive, and some more accidental, even what I would call failure to master. So I'm going to read through the sample here on the right side or on the second page, and as I go through, I will compare it with the original, and I'll show you the 5 kinds of plagiarism, and then I'll also pull up a corrected version so that you could see how all this same information could be used, but in a honest and properly cited way. So I'm going to leave it up here as the split screen just so I can highlight differences. So again, on the right is the sample that has plagiarism in it. On the left is the original. So on the right, it starts off by saying the sad state of the American economy is having unexpected consequences. Take, for example, the recent termination of Michael Graham, a middle-aged carpenter from Tennessee who has played the role of a mall Santa for the last 18 years. Graham had a contract to be Santa at Tyson's Corner Mall in Fairfax County, Virginia through 2012, but apparently commanded too high a price and was therefore the victim of budget cuts. So I'll pause here, and one of the types of plagiarism that's highlighted down here at the bottom, it's labeled E. So this is when, and I'll highlight it in yellow, statistics and facts are used from this source but are not cited. So if you look on the left, all right, the first few sentences, all right, are what I would call, where it outlines who this is about. So it tells who he is, his name, how old he is, where he was from or where he worked, and that he was fired. So just, again, the who, what, when, where is how I would think of it. On the right side, all right, notice, in this beginning in the second sentence, we get all this information. His name, he's middle-aged, he's from Tennessee, he's worked there for 18 years, where it was, all this sort of thing. Now the wording is different. So this is not a case where it's been copied and pasted. But notice there is no acknowledgement of where this information came from. So this would be clearly information has been used from the source, but it's not been cited. So when I see this, like if I were to see this in an essay, I know that a student got this story about, in this case, Michael Graham, from somewhere. They read it on a website, they heard it on the news. Unless they know him, I know they got their information from somewhere. a good analogy or a good other example of this, not analogy, is statistics. When you quote statistics in your essay, unless you're making them up, I know they came from somewhere. They may have come from a textbook. They may have come from another class where a teacher told you about this. You may have gotten them off a website, but I know they came from somewhere. So it's not as if I'm going to be tricked into thinking you knew that, but it needs to be acknowledged, right? So that's one kind of a real easy way for people to accidentally plagiarize, because they think, well, this is just facts, and I put it in my own words so I don't have to cite it, but there still would need to be a citation. So that's E. If we continue reading on the right, okay, I find this absolutely appalling. In the first place, Graham had a contract that would presumably have to be honored unless it contained some fine print which allows for the agreement to be legally dissolved. Secondly, exchanging a believable Santa with a real beard, a real beer belly, and a really bright gleam in his eye for a Santa of the classic alcoholic in a tattered suit variety really seems to further commercialize Christmas. So again, to pause. Here, all right, notice that it is quoted. So I'll highlight this in blue. Okay. Now on the left, if we go back and we look for the original, okay, notice the classic alcoholic in a tattered suit experience, or tattered suit is what he quotes. So that is exactly the same, right? And then a real beard, a real beer belly, and a really bright gleam in his eye, again, is the exact wording. So this would be, if we're looking at the types of plagiarism, this would be D, right? So it is an exact quote, meaning the words are exactly the same, and it is quoted. There are quotation marks around it, but it's not cited. So this is another good example of that kind of failure to master. I'm not going to be tricked that this is from the student because there are quotation marks around it. So I know that it's someone else's words. So this is a good thing that the student has quoted it, but again, notice there's no acknowledgement of where these words came from in the example on the right. So when we look at the corrected version, that's something that will need to be fixed. It goes on, now not only is the tree fake, but so is this guy's facial hair. Regardless of the high cost of a more realistic Santa, which might seem preposterous 11 months out of the year, it seems worth it at Christmas, and with the spirit of the season in mind, even modest. So here, I'm going to highlight it in green, is probably the most difficult kind of plagiarism and one of the worst kinds. So this is on the key here of A through E. This is B. So I'll highlight it in green. On the left, where the original came from, is this very last sentence. So this kind of plagiarism, as it says on B, is where there's an idea. So if you want to think of that as opinion, it's not a fact, like his name and where he came from. It's an opinion, an interpretation that came from the original. So it was Bruce Watson's original idea, and the words have been changed, so it's been paraphrased. So it's not exact wording where it would need to be quoted, but it's not cited. Now, so if we look at the original, if you look on the left, the very last sentence, it says, taken at face value, Michael Graham's hourly rate, which is $30,000 a Christmas season or $175 an hour, just for reference. But taken at face value, Michael Graham's hourly rate may seem outrageous. Taken as a measure of Christmas, it doesn't seem like very much at all. So that was Bruce Watson's idea. He heard this story, he read about and heard about how much Michael Graham made, and he came to the conclusion, it was his opinion, that yes, that's a lot of money, but at Christmas time, maybe it's not that much. Like, that was Bruce Watson's idea. On the right side, if this were a student, they have paraphrased it. And so if you look in the green, regardless of the high cost of a more realistic Santa, which might seem preposterous 11 months out of the year, it seems worth it at Christmas, and with the spirit of the season in mind, even modest. So it's the same idea, that this sounds like a lot of money, but maybe it's not. Now, why this is so serious is because this is something where they have stolen Bruce Watson's idea. This was not this student's original idea, but they've put it in here in such a way that the words are different, so there's no way it could be interpreted, or it's no way it's clear that it came from somewhere else. And there's no citation of any kind. Now, to give the student the benefit of the doubt, what I think happens is we read what someone else says. Bruce Watson had this idea. And we think, I agree with that. I want to say that in my essay because I think that's a good point. And we don't quote it, we put it in our own words, which is good. But when we don't cite it, it becomes plagiarism. Whereas if the student had acknowledged that it was Bruce Watson's idea, cited it, then they could have followed up the citation and talked about why they agreed with that. They could have even said, when I first read this article, I didn't think that the guy deserved this much money. I thought that that was too much to pay someone to be Santa. But after Watson made this observation and I thought about it, I came to this agreement with him. And the student could have gotten more material out of it if they had acknowledged where it came from first and then added their own commentary instead of just taking credit for it as if it were their own. Okay. So the last two kinds of plagiarism are in this second paragraph. The next one we'll look at is C. So I'll highlight it in pink. And here it is in this second sentence. It says, in Bah Humbug, it is mentioned that while Graham was handsomely paid as a mall Santa, his job was not easy because of the long hours, prolonged jolliness, and having to provide his own Santa suits and boots, which are quite expensive. So this is a case where the title is mentioned of the article, and it's paraphrased, meaning again the words have been changed, but it's not cited. So in the original, it's over here where they talk about how much he was paid and how much his suits cost and how much his boots cost, and then what he has to put up with in his job. Okay, so again, it's not exact wording, so it's not things that need to be quoted. They did do a good job over here on the right of putting it in their own words, but and they acknowledge the article title. So there's an attempt here to show that it came from somewhere else. It's just that the citation is not in there as it should be. So the last one, and I will highlight it in red, is where exact words have been used and they're not quoted or cited at all. So here, this is this sentence toward the bottom. That having been said, firing Santa isn't the best way for Tyson's to inspire potential customers to indulge in the spirit of Christmas. And it is exactly the same sentence in the original as the next to last sentence. So this is verbatim. The whole sentence is exactly the same as the original. Notice there are no quotation marks, which should be there when it's exact words, and there is no citation. Okay, so here's how it all matches up. All right, and I will save this and put it on there so you can see it as well. But let me show you the corrected version. Okay, so some very simple changes will take care of all of that plagiarism. So it starts off the same. The sad state of the American economy is having unexpected consequences. But then the first instance of plagiarism there, we introduce the source. For example, in Bah Humbug, and we get the full title, we get the name of the author, and notice this didn't have to be quoted, all of this first part, right? Because it was paraphrased, but we introduced where it came from right from the beginning, and then there was a citation put in, okay? Down here where the exact wording had been used, remember it was already quoted, so that was already okay. All we had to do in this case was add this citation, right? Because again, and I did add what Watson calls as a small signal phrase. Notice not the full title, not the full name as in the first time. This last part, which I went over about paraphrasing, okay, notice we added as Watson points out, and then again a citation where the idea ended. In the next to last one, remember the title was mentioned, so that was already okay. We didn't have to add the name because there was a signal phrase here. So that could stay the same. All that had to happen was the citation. And in the very last instance, where it was exact wording, quotation marks got put around the sentence because it was exactly the same, and the citation was added. So this, while it's written, other than adding a few times where it said what Watson calls as Watson points out, the wording is exactly the same. None of the information had to change. It just needed to be cited properly. Now, some people might say that's a lot of citations in 2 paragraphs. And it is. It is a lot of citations. But here's how you need to think of that. When I'm reading your essay, I want to give you credit for everything that you do. So the good ideas that you have, the good observations you have, the good explanations and examples and all of that, I want to give you credit for that. The only way I can do that is if I can tell when it was you, so when it was your idea, when it was your example, and when it was not. So this sentence here, for example, or this observation, I find this absolutely appalling. You know, that's the student. They had that reaction. When the student here points out that he had a contract, and you know, how can you dissolve a contract unless there's some kind of fine print? Bruce Watson did not make that observation. So it's wonderful that that student did, and I want them to get credit for that. Here, when they say that it further commercializes Christmas, again, that's a good observation. You know, down here, when they get into the idea that we hope at the holidays that, you know, the better side of us will come out, again, that's the student. That's a good idea. And then this very last point here about how, you know, for people who are laid off at Christmas, this is going to be a difficult season. These are all that in the green here are all really good points and really good ideas that this student had. The reason why they are able to get credit for that is because they were very consistent with showing when it wasn't them. When you don't cite properly, it creates this cloud of suspicion. So then even when it is you, there's a question about is it or not, because if I can't tell a lot of the time when it's not you, it's going to make it look like, you know, I'm going to get to the assumption that maybe it's not you. You know, it was a great idea, but where did it come from? Because you've hidden where other stuff came from. So that's why it's really good to be consistent. All right. So I will put all of these files on Blackboard so that you can view them after this video or at any point. And again, as always, if you have questions, please let me know. And I will end this video now.